Well, if you've ever wondered if you can take a Sony lens, just 2-600 here, and pair it with a Nikon mirrorless body, or you're just curious about how it performs, or if it even works correctly, well, this is the video for you. So let's talk about it. Well, if you're wondering how we marry these two up, well, of course it's an adapter, but what adapter? Well, it's one made by a company called Megadap. And this is the ETZ21 PRO, which is the newest version. There's also this one here, which is the ETZ21, which is the older version. What does the Pro version have over this one? Well, the older one has a USB port where you would update it to get new firmware for new cameras and lenses and things like that. This one actually can update through the camera to the adapter, which is really cool. They also updated the release button on it, made it metal, a little more solid. And the last thing it did is it made it where more Tamron and Sigma lenses work better with this body that are the E-mount for the Sony. So basically what this does takes a E-mount lens and marries it to a Z-mount camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to go out in the field. We're going to test these out. Now, one of the things before we do that is we're going to put this together is we're going to look at these adapters. So in the box, it's just the adapter just in a bag. That's all it is. We're not going to do unboxing. This is the original adapter. So what's really cool about this adapter, a lot of the adapters, like for the F to Z and the Canon, the R mount that just goes to its native lenses, like the Nikon F to Z and the Canon EF to RF, and even my Fringer adapter that takes my Canon lenses and puts on this Nikon body. They're thick. They're about as thick as this whole thing, just as it sits a little thicker than that. This little guy is really cool. If I can get it off of here. That's all it is. It's just this little thin little plate with just rings. Really, really nice. I'm going to put this back in here before I tear it up or lose it. But that's all it is, the adapter. Well, I think the big question a lot of people are asking is, why do you want to take a Sony lens and stick it on a Nikon Z body? Or like I did in the past, take a Canon lens and stick it on a Nikon Z body. Well, it's about that barrier to entry, that cost barrier to entry, to get in to try out a new camera body. And by able to take your current lens system, let's say you're a Sony guy and you got a bunch of Sony lenses, and be able to stick them on a Z-mount camera to try it out, that makes that cost not so bad, because there's no way I could have got into Nikon to fall in love with these Nikon cameras, just like I love my Canon cameras, if I wasn't able to find an adapter to adapt my EF lenses that work just like using this camera with their Z or the F lenses, getting the same functionality of it. There's that Fringer adapter, which I have a video on. And that's what this adapter is supposed to do, by what a lot of people say, what a lot of people have read. I know the version 1 had a couple little small issues with it, which we'll talk about when we get out in the field and we start testing this out on both of these. But that's why. And that old adage of, or the discussion of what's more important, the body or the lens, you know, the chicken or the egg, which is better, or which comes first, that is. And I would say all day long, it's the lens. Because if you get good glass, that's going to take you across all your camera bodies when you go through your system, whatever camera system you have. Example is that 500 f4 I have. That thing's a 15-year-old lens. When it came out, actually, the lens was bought 14 or 15 years ago by the original owner. I'm the second owner of it. But that lens is fantastic glass. If I've got to take one lens with me, that's the lens I'm going to take every time, because it is my best glass, best producing images because of that glass. And you have a lot of glass. So that's how you can get into testing these cameras out. Just like I said, if I hadn't been able to adapt those Canon lenses, I could have never tried out the Nikon Z system. So if you're a Sony shooter, it's kind of what this video is about. If you're a Sony shooter and you want to look at the Nikon system, the Z, any of the Z cameras, that's what this video is about. That's what we're going to test out and see. So if we could get the same thing like I'm getting out of that Fringer to the Canon lenses, to be able to use it with these Sony lenses, that's going to be fantastic if somebody has a Sony shooter that wants to also shoot Nikon or just dip their toes in to play with them. So, or the next part actually is, this lens used is about $1,500 now, $1,500 to $1,600. Yes, we do have the new Nikon 180 to 600, which is the same aperture at 600 at 6.3. But you know, if you already have this lens, or maybe you get your hands on it cheap, or, you know, for the meantime, it's going to be kind of hard to get hold of that 180 to 600 because everybody's wanting it right now, and, you know, there's not a whole lot of copies out there. But that's what we're going to test this. We're going to see how this works. And I've actually got some wide lenses we can test with this too, Sony lenses. Before we go out in the field and test this guy out, and what our test we want to prove and show is that this adapter and this Sony lens on this Nikon Z body works just like an F mount or a Z mount lens on the Z mount camera. Can we get the autofocus that works reliably just like it does on the F mount or the Z mount? And also, can we get the video autofocus to lock on and do what it does? And the last thing is I want to know is how the IBIS is translating between the lens to the body. Now, before we get out, I want to show you one thing on this that will confuse you. It confused me and made me kind of get a little confused to try to get this lens on here, on this mount. So on the Sony, you have a little white dot, and it's hard to see on a white lens. But it's right there, and that's what, if you have a Sony camera, that's what you line up to the white dot on the body. Now, it doesn't work like that on this one. You have to look on the outside of the ring here, and it's actually on this one too. Maybe a little easier to see on this one. There it is. So you have a little red line right on the outside of the ring. It's right, keep trying to find it every time. It's right there. It's literally on the top, flat on the top if you've got the collar at the bottom. So all you do is you take that, you line it up to the white dot. Where are you, white dot? Then you'll mount. So if you're trying to use the white dot on the lens to line up the white dot on the camera body, it won't work. You got to look for that red ring, which is going to be right on the top of this lens to line up on the side with that Nikon white dot. Once you get that, now we're connected. So with all that said, all that bambling, let's just go out in the field, see how this guy works. We're not going to do cards or, you know, sharpness corners and stuff like that. There's enough videos out there. We will do sharpness in the field comparisons, but we're not going to do a lot of that really crazy technical stuff. We're going to see how this feels in the field. Is the autofocus good? Is the video focus good? And do we not have any problem with the IBIS translation between the body and the lens? That's our main things I want to test out. So let's get out there and go do it. All right, we are back from the field after testing this Megadap adapter out with the Nikon Z9 with that Sony 200-600 lens. You'll notice you don't see it here on the desk right now. That's because I was lucky enough that Bill loaned me his 2-600 lens. I don't own that lens. For me to test with this Nikon Z9, because I think that's what a lot of people are going to use this Megadap adapter at if they're a Sony shooter, or they can find that lens really cheap and they don't own this lens over here right now. Future video. But we want to see how this adapter works. So the couple things, like I said before, we wanted to know is, how does the autofocus work? Does it have any drift? Does it have any hunt? We also want to know in video how it works with the autofocus, and also how stable is it. Does the image stabilization transfer from the lens to the body? So we'll answer those questions. And we already know that this lens is pretty sharp, because, you know, the 2-600 has been used constantly, so know it's a really good sharp glass. All right, first let's look at some EVF footage of the autofocus performance of this Nikon Z9 with that 2-600 lens. So what we want to know is the autofocus quick enough and fast enough? Does it act like a native lens in the autofocus as it sees the spot and it grabs the spots? We'll look at that real quick. Now, forbearing about this, the autofocus performance of it is really good, but what we're trying to answer is it like an F mount or a Z mount lens? Is it that quick? So let's look at this real quick. So now we're going to do our first rack pull, do a duck. So what you'll see right there was it locked, it got the gold box, and then it zoomed in. It wasn't like quick, so it took the second for the motors to get to that spot. So we'll look at some more here. And I'm just whipping around looking for ducks, looking for ducks, looking for ducks. Got different from close to far. I was trying to go from close to far to medium to close, things like that. There it was again. So what happened there again, you saw the gold box come up, because when you see the gold box, that's when I'm hitting the button, if it's blue or gold. So, and when it jumped, it's taking a second to rack to it. Now, like I said, these results are really fast. A year or so ago, we just said, hey, that's fantastic. But like I said, we're trying to see this as close as Z. We'll look at what the Z does here in a bit. There it was again. So you saw how I grabbed the gold box in it. To it, so at least it's locking it up. We'll see about the hit rate, see if we have any drift, amongst that. But it's kind of pulsing to it. Still good, but we'll look how this other lens performs in a minute. All right, let's look at that one again, because that's the one that I saw a lot of when I was using it. So let me get back up here a little bit. So what we're going to see on this duck, what it's going to do, it's going to miss focus, grab focus, go past the bird, and then come back. And it's going to pulse a little bit. So this is where I saw it several times do this, where it would go to the bird, then it would go past the bird and come back. So it was kind of pulsing there, and then it would lock on. Once it locked on, though, it stayed on there pretty good. So let's watch it again here. Miss. So you see that? So watch it one more time there, because it did this a lot. And we're going to play this back at half speed here so we can see it a lot quicker. So it comes to it. See, it's out. It missed. Still missing. Comes back. So what it, like I said, what it did, it was short of it. Then it went past it. Then it came back and locked up. Once it locked up on it, it stayed pretty much locked up. All right, put this back to normal speed. And we'll probably see this happen another time or two more. And there, that was another one of those slow racks to it. Like you see, I'll hit it, and I would see, now, maybe hard for you to see it that quick, but you know, when you're watching the eye the real time, when you're pushing the button, you can see the box lock and then the focus rack to it. Again, it's extremely fast. It's locking the birds up. It's hitting the eye, staying on it. So it's doing really good. That was an interesting one. So I'm trying to get out to that far bird. And you see he's out of focus here. And when it jumps out there, you're going to see the gold box form around the duck, but it's out of focus, and it'll try to grab it, then it loses it. At this distance, it should be zipping right to it. See, it took a while. It actually even came back and gave the red boxes up front. So it did at times search a little bit out there, a little bit farther than I, you know, but it's still, we're getting great results where it's locking the eye on the bird. So it's working really good. But there's every once in a while it gets a little off. So here's where it did really, really well. We'll play this back at half speed. So what you're going to see, it's going to jump to this duck on the left first. And I said, no, I don't want that one. I used my D-pad and I kicked it to the duck in front. So it worked like it should. So that's really good that it's been able to switch subjects really well. So you watch it jump to the duck on the left, and then it's going to jump back to the duck on the right. Lock. Boom. Now, second duck, when it came back, you notice here that it was gold. Watch it again. So we're locked. So the autofocus is telling me, the white box is telling me, I see a duck. I hit the autofocus. Gold. I'm locked on that duck. Now I'm going to hit the D-pad to the right because I had arrows showing up, which should jump to the duck in the front. So once I do that, I'm still holding the autofocus button down when I do that. You notice that box is gold. So that should be telling it to, it should be, you know, locked focus. Let's jump to that. Let's look how long it takes. Now I'm at half speed, but you'll see how it pulsed right there? Run that back just a little bit. Watch it pulse, and it did this a few times. See that little pulse in there? Bouncing a little bit there. So the reason you worry about that little pulse in there is if you're doing shots, especially you got a bird in flight, you may not quite get your focus where you want to have it. So let's keep moving on, look at some more. So here, grab the tail instead of the head. There was that pulse again. It's real hard to see that pulse. We'll just go back here for a second, look at it real quick. Grab the duck, comes here, and we had a little bit of a pulse in there. That was a lot quicker pulse than the last one though. See, that box is on there for a long time and expanded and it came back, so it had a little bit of a problem getting to that eye. Now, again, I'm nitpicking here because we'll look at the Z here in a minute and see how quick it gets to. We'll see if we see the same behavior or not. All right, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to focus way in the background of trees, and I'm going to come back to duck completely out of focus and see how long it takes it to rack back to that bird. So I've hit the focus on the background. Come down here and find me a duck. Not bad. It ragged to it okay. It kind of hit the middle of the duck, but at least it came back to it and locked the duck up. I expected to hit the eye instead of the body, but we'll do it again here, see what our results are. So there's that pulse again. You see how it went, kind of jumped a little bit there? Look at that one more time. So there's that little pulse again. So it just does this little jump thing. Look at that one more time. We'll do it half speed again. So you can really see that pulse when you jump at half speed. Lock, pulse. So yeah. So again, it's happening very fast. We're nitpicking here, but what we're expecting again, like I keep saying, is it as fast as the native lens? That's what we're trying to get to. Now this is still very, to me, very acceptable autofocus performance on that. And when we look at the hit rate, we'll see how that goes here in a minute. Now, did it pulse any other that you couldn't see? Because a lot of times when you see a box locked up, and we talked about this in the last R7 video, that box may show it locked on that eye, but stuff's still moving there because that's just a GUI, just a graphical interface telling you where things are. As things are happening faster than it can react to move it, it's moving a little bit. And that could just be a couple inches, but sometimes that's the difference in focus and out of focus. All right, there's another one of those little pulses right there. This bird's a little farther out, but what you'll see again, it'll kind of do this little number back and forth rather than snap right to it. Because when that box comes up, it's saying, this is where I want the motors to focus. And then on a native lens, on your whatever camera, so if you're Sony to Sony, Nikon to Nikon, Canon to Canon, the autofocus says, go here, and then the motor goes there. And what's happening with this one is it's missing a little bit. It's trying to correct itself. That's what this adapter is trying to tell that Sony lens. This is the Nikon signal, interpret it to a Sony motor signal. So watch this and it'll do the little pulse again. There it was. See, it pulsed. And it never locked on the birds. Look at that in half slow-mo. I want to look at that one again myself. Let's move this back down half speed. All right, let's watch this one. Okay, the gold box came up and it was on his chest because it really can't see. There are two closed eyelids. So when a mallard closes his eye, it's got wide eyelids, still where the eye ought to be. But it's finding the body, it's not finding the head there. All right, back to full speed. Okay, so that one's interesting. That next duck I went to, it really had problems finding it. Now, yes, it's overexposed. And get back here. So it's overexposed, but what you'll see right there is that gray box is the AI system telling me I see a head. So if I hit the autofocus button, it should jump to that spot. But watch what happens when I hit the button. See how it jumps around? Now again, the bird's that, but it could be because the motors didn't jump there when I hit the button. So now, so you saw gold there for a second. That means it's hitting this. That's where the autofocus is supposed to go, and it's not. It's still not there. And then finally, it grabs the head. Now, once it grabbed the head, it's stuck. Let's watch that back in real time. Whoops, that was real time. Excuse me. Let's watch that back again. So this is in real time here. All right, here we go. So, it's supposed to lock the body. You know, it saw a head, hit the autofocus button, it jumped to the body, and it didn't lock there, and then it finally did lock there, and then it kind of came out, and then it locked the head up fine, and it stayed tracking to it completely. So, like I said, it will get there. It will get there really quick, a lot quicker than we did a few years back. We couldn't get this fast autofocus, so it's still working really good. See, it stayed locked on really good until I let go of the button. Same thing, you see that little pulse there? So that again was the autofocus should, you know, it shouldn't have pulsed like that. It should have just gone right into the bird, but watch it pulse. There you go. So it was kind of weird there. Again, it's locking him way out there, distance quite well. Locked that bird up even though it stuck its head into the water. Locked that bird. Now that's a good test there, because that bird is in the brush. Let me back that up a hair. See, that bird is back there in those weeds over there, and it still found it. That's the butt of it, not the head. So it found the subject. So this new firmware is really, really good. That's where the Nikon before the 4.10 would not have found that bird. And I'm using auto area AF, the whole screen. So let's keep moving. Not bad. So that would work about like what I expected to see when it just jumps right to it. So this is what you really want to see. Lock and then go to it and stop. See, that's what you want to see. There was that pulse. That did that pulse again. There you go. Lock, lock. Those all locked fine. It's actually what's funny, and see how it locks that rock in front of it? Look at that. It's locking its reflection, and then it locks this little piece of stump. See, it sees the head and the stump. It sees the stump as a bird, and it sees the bird as a bird. You've got two boxes. And it locked that bottom one, then it locked the head. Now it's got the eye, has no problem. There was that pulse again, that little pulse we get. Now, let's look at a Nikon Z lens and see how the autofocus performs. So now you'll be able to see the difference in how that one was working, how this one's working. Boom. So you see how that focus worked? It stopped at the focal plane where it says the bird is. So watch it again. Boom. So I didn't get a white box. I just hit the button. I didn't have any white box, and it found it real quick. So that's what you want to see. That's what I meant with the difference in that autofocus was on the 2 to 6. He'd point over here, but the lens is over here. The 2 to 600 would do those little slower racks or those little pulses. We'll look at some more here. See how that did? Just right there, went right to it. Boom. So that's another just prime example of. Back too far. Here we go. Let's go half speed here. So I don't have this bird. There's no boxes. It's completely out of focus here. Well, watch how quick. And this is half speed. Boom. It was gold box and locking up all at the same time. Extremely, extremely fast. There's an example where it jumped off. Now, this is the same one a minute ago. You remember where the Sony was seeing this piece of wood here below it, locking that and the head at the same time? It didn't do it here. Now, it did grab his butt first. Let's see where his head was. So, real interesting. So, it tried to grab that in front of it. I can get my mouse over there. Try to jump to this for a second. I'm not telling it to focus yet. This is, if you see a gray, that's the autofocus on this saying, here's what I'm seeing. So if you see the stick in front of it, you know you don't want to hit the button right then and there. You want to hit the button when it gets on the bird, or you're going to hit it trying to force it in there. So what I did was waited a second, and then I hit the button, and it grabbed the body. The duck's eye was closed the time, and then it did this. So now we'll see where it goes. I let off the button because I'm not getting my focal spot right. Hit it again, nothing. Then it goes to the head. So it's not infallible to not find the head, but it found the duck. But when it jumped it, there was no rack or no pulse. And then it grabbed the head. But like I said a minute ago, the 2 to 600, the Sony with the Megadap was grabbing this and this head. It's the exact same place as duck. I didn't move at all. That this duck didn't move by the time I switched lenses. See, there's no pulse there on that one. It just right to it. Same thing there. It was out of focus right here, but it's seeing the Nikon, that gray box is saying, I see the duck. I hit the button. Boom. Just instant right there. Fast motors in that lens. So now we're going to go out to distance. These guys are on the other side of the creek, pretty good distance from me. You'll see if it locks up, how well it locks up. Boom. I mean, it went from out of focus to in focus in just, I was really expecting to see the box first, but when I hit the button, it just jumped right to it. So I didn't get a prompt in this one here. I didn't get a prompt saying I see a head. I could see the shape of the duck through the viewfinder out there, distance. I just hit the button and it jumped right to it. Zoop. Now you got these ducks here. So these are moving left to right. They're swimming at a pretty good little pace. We'll see what it does, how it locks on. Boom, right on that eye. Jumped right to it. Even when I moved my camera up and back down, it got right back to that eye again, the front duck. Really nice. All right, boom. That is fantastic. Run that back half speed. So you see the box move a little bit, but it's still on the head and the eye. Watch this half speed here. There it is. Hit the button. Boom, boom. So really good. Boom. So anyway, that's the difference with using the Megadap 2-600 and those examples were the Nikon Z lens. So you can see the difference in the speed in the rack. So what is my conclusion about autofocus speed? It's really good. It's very, very usable using the Megadap adapter with that 2-600. Not a problem. What you will see, it is slower than the Nikon Z lens getting to it, but it's an adapted lens using an adapter, but it's still extremely quick and extremely sticky. Once it sticks, it sticks. It's really nice. So it's working really, really good. So next, let's look at the hit rate of these pictures. All right, the first one we got here is this duck here where he's sitting. So we're going to see if this, I think about 6 or 7 shots in this little burst. We'll see if they're in focus or not. So we can look at the very first shot. We can see, no, it's not. And where is the focus? It's not here. Yeah, it's here. So this focus looks like it's a little in front of that beak. Yeah, see, it's more sharper here than it is right here. It's not anywhere in here, so it's not in focus. So the very first shot in this was not in focus. Go to the next one. Still out. Still out. Now we're almost in. So we're, start over. Out, out, almost in. Now we're in focus. So now we've got this bill here. Next one's in focus. Now, you got to remember, I'm at 1/400th of a second. There was not much light this day. I'm at 400th of a second at 5,000 ISO at 6.3, out at 600 millimeters. I'm shooting everything at the extreme right now. And this one is it out of focus or is it motion blur? So the focus is up here more in the front. See, while it goes on the stick, it's moved forward some. So this focus is out. It's almost back in, and it's pretty much back in. So in this burst, we've got out, out, almost in, in. All right, next set of ducks. Looks like my focus is hitting the duck on the right, not the one on the left. So let's look at this duck over here. So it looks good, looks good. Looks good. Looks good. So those all look pretty good. So these 4 all look pretty good. All right, let's see here. So it's focused on the same duck, but it's just different set of bursts here. Let's look real quick. We're in focus. That second one doesn't look as good. It could be motion blur with 400th of a second. Looks good. That one is not. So 1, 2, 3 look good. 4 is not. 5 is not. 6 is really not. So yeah, those didn't look so hot there. All right, let's look at this little burst here. So we look at this one, all it goes, where it's pulsing. So to me, the focus looks like it's more here in his back. Let's see if it ever jumps to his head. Now this may have been where the focus box said go to the back too, because that did happen a couple times. Now I jumped to the head, so it's in the back. The very first shot's out. Next shot's in focus. Out of focus again. Out of focus again. Back in focus. So it's really interesting. So out of those 5, we got 2 that were in focus. All right, this is the burst where remember this one where we had the rock in front where he was getting confused? And looks like it's more around in here. It's not on the head. Next one's still really not on the head. It's not that bad out of focus, but it's still not perfect. We're getting closer to critical focus. You notice that rock went out of... Rock looks really in focus here, or this stick. Now that's getting out of focus and the bird's eye's in focus. Now we've hit focus finally. We're in focus. We're in focus. Still in focus. Pretty good. So that's where we were. We had the first few were out. So that initial pulse, that little jump we were talking about earlier, that's what happened here. So out, 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 finally in. Now it's grabbing. Let's look at this guy. This is the one that took a long burst on. Wow, I sure did. Now we got a lot of this guy. Let's look at him. All right, we are out of focus. Where are we focused at? We are focused on that stick right in front of him. So maybe it grabbed the stick. I don't think it did. We looked at the EVF and it looked like it jumped to the bird. This may have been where that pulse was happening, because when you're taking those first shots is when that pulse is happening or hitting that focus. I'm probably hitting that focus and that shutter at the same time. So let's look here. Still focused there, still out in focus. We're getting closer in focus, out. We're close to in focus. Getting closer. Now we're almost there. Yeah, so now we're in focus finally. Now we're out of focus. In focus. There's two there. In focus, in focus. So we're in focus here. Close his eye again. Still closed his eye again, so he went there to there. So that's interesting. So we're focus, focus, out of focus, 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 focus. So let's look at the Nikon and see what its hit rate was as far as the same type of stuff. All right, let's look here. All right, here we go. We're focused on the boy. Yeah, we're focused on the boy. It's pretty good. Let's get moving, see what we got. Focus, 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 focus. And he moved his head. Still in focus. Move his head up here a little bit more. Still in focus. Moved his head again. In focus. That looks like a little bit of motion blur. Maybe a little front focus there, but it still doesn't look bad. Out of focus. In focus. Let's look at this longer burst. So remember, this is the same as what we looked on the other bird, doing the same thing. Different time, same bird, same area, doing the same stuff. Let's see what it looks like. Remember the other one on the Megadap, we were out of focus for several frames and we started getting in focus. So for the very first frame, we are in focus. Still in focus, still in focus. In focus, even when he raises his head, oh, I like those drops there. Because actually hitting right here, it's not getting the front of that beak, it's getting right in this, from his chest to the right behind his bill. Pretty cool. In focus, still in focus, still in focus. Yep, so she's in focus the whole way. So really cool, still in focus, moving. And I'm at 400th of a second too, so that's really, really good. All right, so let's move on. All right, we got this little guy. Remember, this is the one with the little stump here on the Megadap where this was in focus, the eye's out of focus, the eye's in focus. Eye still in focus. Eye still in focus. Still in focus. Even when he's closing his eyes, still in focus. That rock's out of focus. Still in focus. Yep, still in focus in all of them. Really nice. So that worked out well. All right, let's check this little burst out here. So we're in focus. We're in focus. Still in focus. Still in focus. I don't know how I got in the develop module, but I was somehow. Still in focus. Looks good. So that was in focus all the way through. All right, so we can see that on the Nikon lens, pretty much in focus. We had one that was a couple of maybe questionable in that burst thing here, but we're staying in focus. So the motors, we don't have any drift on the Nikon. So what's my consensus as far as stills go for the Megadap adapter with the 2-600 on this Nikon Z? The focus will get you there. The focus will hit. Now you're going to get it's got some pulse. It may have some pulls too. It may drift back and forth. But as far as our hit rate we saw, we're 50% maybe what I was getting. So we do have drift with this, with the focus with it in there with your stills. So for stills, is it like the Z? No. Is it usable? Yeah, it's usable. It's usable, but it's not near what the Z is. All right, now let's look at the video real quick and see what the image stabilization looks like in the video. And we'll also look at the tracking. So let's go here real quick. Let's look at some the Sony 200-600 footage and see what it looks like. But what you're seeing some jitter. So you're seeing some stabilization is not perfect. Now I'm hand holding this too, so doing the best I can here. All right, let's look at some more footage here. So, like I said, the focus is working great. Everything looks good, but we're just seeing a little bit of shake here. Again, hand holding, not on a tripod, but got some shake here. Now, what I found out when I was using this, what I've had happening is, I tried all the different focus modes, 1, 2, and 3 on the lens, which just is horizontal and vertical panning is all it is. None of that changed it whatsoever. Didn't think it would. So what we got here is the image stabilization of the lens is not working with the body as well as it should. We got some shake, and we'll look at the Nikon, and I'll show you why I say that. And I turned the IS on and off on the Sony lens. No change whatsoever. So it was competing with the IBIS in the body, or just wasn't working right. So I went and turned the IBIS off and used just the lens stabilization. This is what we got. Still wobbly, but much better. But we start a little wobbly, but it's still steadier than it was prior. Now let's look at the Nikon handheld using the Z lens with this body. Drastic change. So you can see we don't see the wobble, we're not bouncing anymore. Same handheld, everything. So just smooth, really nice. So this is more Nikon footage. You see it's fairly steady except for when I jerk the lens there real quick. So now let's go back to the Sony. And you see I got jump going on. So this is with the IS on in the body and the lens is on also, or the lens is off. Either one doesn't matter. So that's what was happening with the Sony lens all the time, just like this. You see it's got shake. The only way I could get it better was leave the IS on the lens, turn it off in the body. It got a little bit better. So if you are shooting this combo, that's what I suggest to do. And then we go back to the Nikon, and it's just rock steady. All right, so what is my conclusion on the Megadap adapter with a Nikon Z camera using a Sony lens? The questions we needed to answer first off was, is it usable? Does it work? Well, yeah, it does work. We see that. It works pretty good. As far as autofocus, how does autofocus compare? How does it work? It does have a little bit of pulsing, does have some hunting, and it still, as we notice, our hit rate suffers a little bit. We're getting about 60 to 40%. That's what I'm seeing in the test I did. Your mileage may vary when you're using it, but when I was hitting, I was getting 60 to 40%. Mainly, I was getting that initial pulse, and I would miss those first images, and then there, during the burst, we would get some drift. And in video, we saw that using the IS on or off and the IBIS on the body, it was wobbly. If we turned the IBIS off on the body, left IS on the lens, it got a little better, but it's very usable, but not as good as the Nikon Z. You saw that it was rock steady. And that last question we really wanted to answer was, if you were want to dip your toes into it and that you had a 200-600 and you want to use it as your main lens, could you? Is it as good as the F mount or the Z mount? And the answer to that question is no. The Z and the Fs do not have any of that pulse. They don't have that IBIS wobble in video either. And the hit rate is dead on all of them. You may have a little bit of drift, but that's more due to conditions in the bird as opposed to the lens and the camera communication. So it's not as good as the Z. So what is my recommendation if you're a Sony shooter and you want to dip your toes in a Nikon Z? I'd say, yeah, go rent it and test it out if you have a 200-600 shooting wildlife. See if it's for you. It will work. It's again, not as good as a Z, but it's reliable. It will get you there. But if you are a Nikon shooter, or you shoot Nikon, it may not be a Nikon Z9, it could be a Z6 or Z7, Z6 II, whatever, and you see a 200-600 coming up or another Sony lens, should you go out and buy it and use this adapter to do it? Well, unless you get it really cheap, I probably wouldn't if it's your main lens, because again, you're going to have some hunting, you're going to have some of that pulsing, and for the same amount of money you get that lens. Nikon does have that 180-600 now. That's about the same lens that doesn't have any of those issues. So if you're dipping your toes in from Sony, yes, it's a viable option. You can get great images out of it. The focus will hit. You're just going to have the hit rate suffer and things like that, and then you got to watch your video with the wobble. So yeah, that is my conclusion. A really cool piece of kit. This guy runs $250. I never mentioned that about that. This adapter. Almost all the adapters are anywhere from, you know, for going from one camera to a different manufacturer's lens, those type things. They're all in that $200 to $300 range or $400 range. But this one does not work as well as the Nikon Z's and F's, but it does work well. So the final answer is as good as the Nikon Z? No, but it is reliable. You can use it. So there you go, guys. A lot of rambling. Hopefully those images in the video will show you kind of how that works if you're wanting to do that, or just curious about how well it works with this Megadap adapter, the Pro version, the new one, the 2-1. Well, guys, as always, if you're enjoying the content of the channel, you know, like, subscribe, leave me a comment. I try to reply to every comment that comes across. And until next time, guys, get outside, go run that shutter.